this last answer that I feel like comes out of the Oscars is this idea that I call kind of shrinking your we. The idea is that, if we go back from the very beginning, when we were talking at the very beginning about all these fights, the thing that I said back then was, it seems like hours ago, but the thing I said back then was that everything was small. Like it was just these families. It was just a small inner circle, interrelational, personal, kind of we going on, right? It wasn't a bigger we. It was a small we. And so I asked Shaylyn her last thoughts on this concept of we, of whether, anyway, I'm going to ask her the question, so I'll let it roll.
What do you think about just the premise that maybe this we is too big that we've been thinking about? Like, even from a United States of America kind of perspective, like when I looked at the movies, I thought, well, maybe the family that we need to concentrate on is not global now. We need to concentrate on our American family. But I'm kind of thinking that maybe the we that we need is just me and a stranger,
Yeah.
like maybe that's the call to we that maybe creates a bigger we, but if all goes well, but ultimately the we just needs to be smaller. Like these Oscars are saying, get your we smaller. Is that maybe like you wrote a book about a trend that's historical, for us to become a we, and can we get that upswing? But is it really about micro we's that lead to a macro we or something like that?
Yeah, I think that that's right. I don't think that it's either or, right? Like either we're going to focus on the we of humanity or we're going to focus on the we of me and my neighbors, right?
Yeah.
But I do actually think the more I've been in this field, the field of trying to think about how we bring people together, trying to think about how we create community, the more I've done that work, the more I've realized that the global we is too abstract, right? It has to start with experiences that we have every day in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our schools with real people with whom we're trying to find real common ground on real issues that we face every single day.
All right, so I think it is a smaller we. Like she said, it's just like me and you as a we, right? And so I'm reading a book, and I'm real passionate about the book. The book is called The Power of Strangers, and I'm telling you, this is transforming my life. Maybe it's just Confessions of an Introvert, but the whole book is about what if we just started talking to strangers? And what if we just got used to talking to strangers more, right? And that simple thing, like he writes a whole book about it, and it's just amazing about how if we put ourselves in other people's spaces. In fact, there's a little excerpt from the book to bring up where it says, many people dread talking to strangers, but when they do, they tend to come away feeling good, happier, less lonely, more optimistic, more empathetic, with a stronger sense of belonging to their communities. It actually makes them feel safer, providing ready affirmation that people around them are well-meaning. So, they actually did, there's so much good stuff in this book, but basically, they did studies where they put people out there and talking to strangers, and most people felt like 20% of the strangers would talk back to them, and it ended up being like 90-something% of the strangers talked back to them, and their conversation went on like 2 to 3 times more than they thought, And if you think about it, just the idea, and stranger, what I mean by that, I know because we have this whole stranger danger kind of nice little rhyme, but in reality, I don't believe there is like as much stranger danger as we think. Like now we need to be like strangers, like people who are different, people who I don't know. Basically, that's what I'm talking about. It's just your neighbor, not your physical neighbor, but just the person that you don't know.
Maybe your physical neighbor.
Maybe your physical neighbor too. But that we have to begin to engage in, talking to people we don't know, And so so one of the things Shaylyn said that was really good, she said, I feel like the problem that we have right now is we need to break through barriers, but we just don't know how. And so this book was really good for me because I was like, oh, there's some hows in this. Like, there's some wonderful little hows. I'll give you some tips real quick that he does. He says, first thing you should do is if it's really awkward, you should just go ahead and disclaim that and go, I know you're not supposed to talk to strangers, but I just really love your purse or something like that, that kind of thing. And if you can just increase your curiosity and increase your humility And don't worry about embarrassment, like that was the things. Or this is one of my favorites, is the breaking the script is what he says. And I've been trying this lately. And what you do is when a person says, so how's it going today? And most of us go fine. What we do instead, what he does is he says, when they say, how are you doing today? You go, well, I'm kind of a 7 on a, 7 out of 10 today, is my day. How about you? And it all of a sudden was creating these conversations where a person had to put a number on their day, right? Just like little things like that were just absolutely amazing. And so anyway, I'm just kind of excited. Maybe it's an introvert. I talked to my wife about this and she's like, what are you talking about? Like she's an extrovert. And then my mom is like the perfect example of this. Like my mom walks around her neighborhood and all she does is just like go, hey, I love this and this. And she is like the epitome of a person who's not as scared, to make, every stranger is a friend kind of thing. But I think it's just really that simple as far as breaking through barriers. And I got one example, or one thing that happened. It happened downstairs in this building. So I was waiting to to talk to the guy who was in charge of this building about doing this event. And I was in the waiting room downstairs, right? And so when I was sitting in the waiting room, everybody around me was on their phones, right? You know what it looks like, where everybody's just like there, buried on their phones. You're looking around the waiting room, and everybody's there. And the guy was next to me had his phone and everything. And so I was just tempted. I was just like, okay, well, I can do my email. So let me pull up my email. And all of a sudden, it was like God said, okay, you got to practice what you preach here. You got to, like this is about breaking through barriers this year. So I looked at the guy next to me, and I said, hey, I love your watch, And he goes, oh, yeah, my dad gave me this watch, and then he went into this whole story about how it was very sentimental to him as far as that. And then I said, so what are you doing? What do you do? And he goes, well, I've been a real estate agent since 14. And I'm like, 14? How are you a real? And then we started a conversation about that, right? And then all of a sudden I said, well, the guy who's developing this complex, have you met him yet? His name is Rob Parker. He's a friend of mine, is what I said. And he goes, oh, yeah. I'm getting ready to meet him. Like he's coming in just in a second. That's who I'm waiting for. And I said, you're kidding me, Rob. I was supposed to text him and tell him I was here and see if, maybe he could meet me. I said, but I decided to not be on my phone. And all of a sudden, Rob comes in the door and he looks at us talking and he's like, what's going on here? I'm supposed to meet this guy. Brian, you're here? Oh, and all of a sudden we have this not triangle of sadness, but triangle of connection, right?
Happiness.
And I know it sounds so simple, but I hope it is so simple, right? I hope that's what it is. It's just really simple that we just kind of break through these barriers.